Your source for all things Texas Tech. This is the Ask Level podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome into another episode of the Ask Level podcast, episode numero 44. Getting on up there. Chris Level and myself, Chois Woodman, joining you after a busy week in the world of college athletics. Level, what's happening, man?
A lot.
That's putting it
yeah, obviously by the time you're listening to this, a lot has gone on and changed the college athletics landscape. Essentially in a span of, I guess technically when you boil it down, in a span of about 6 hours, when official announcements were made, that there essentially was no more Power 5 anymore. There's only a Power 4, and the Big 12's, kind of face changes dramatically, and Texas Tech is now in a giant 16-team league, just like that, which is kind of the way a lot of this pointed, but you just weren't sure, but as we all saw, you just weren't sure what was ultimately going to happen. And I think that obviously the Pac-12 with their media rights deal, that was the first domino or lack thereof that needed to kind of happen and fall. And then once everybody got familiar with what that was, or in this case wasn't, then things would change. And I don't know what to think if you're SMU or San Diego State or UConn or Gonzaga, or anything like that, because I think they were kind of, I don't know, maybe potentially hoping that that there was a spot for them at the table. But the way this thing is structured now, it doesn't appear so, at least yet.
Yeah, it's just the timeline of everything was pretty wild. First, obviously, kind of going back through it, Colorado makes the first move a couple of Fridays ago or Thursday, and then gets announced on a Friday. They didn't even need to see the media deal because apparently they knew what was coming. Then about a full week later, we get all the news of the meeting of the Pac-12. The deal itself was not any better than what had been rumored. Then Arizona Board of Regents meets. Sounds like on Thursday night that they're going to be a Big 12 member, and then for an hour or an hour and a half there, someone in the Washington and Oregon camps leak to the media, oh, hey, wait up, we might go to the Pac-12, or we might go ahead and sorry. Well, they initially they say,
might stay put.
Stay put. I said that wrong, but we may stay put, and then that all dissipates. And apparently Washington and Oregon played themselves into a better deal with the Big Ten, and just a wild 24 hours or so there and Thursday and Friday. And ultimately, and it ends up with no more Pac-12 and a lot more Big 12 schools to familiarize ourselves with. And this is all going down in 2024 too. So
immediately.
Yeah.
Because this is really the first time, I think, that in some of these instances there was really not much. You didn't have to pay an exit fee.
Yeah.
You didn't have to really do anything along those lines. You didn't have to attempt to break a grant of rights because there wasn't one. And I think Colorado's leadership really kind of told you what was coming with the Pac-12 based on, whenever they finally did announce, say, we're going to the Big 12, and then they kind of come out and have this press conference a week ago or so. And I think there was a lot of, we want to be on ESPN and Fox. It is important for our brand and to grow our institution, with linear television. And I think they were kind of telling you what the case was for the Pac-12, but until we knew, we just didn't ultimately know. And it turns out, basically every bit of what the Pac-12's deal was streaming and on Apple and, incentive based, and just kind of, they have fumbled this for years. I think their leadership, multiple different leaders, and I think some of their the folks that commissioner, whether it be Larry Scott or George Kliavkov, report to, just kind of fumbled it and were short-sighted. But it ultimately cost them. And here we sit. But whenever you look at the hand that Brett Yormark was dealt when he took over, it's just it's hard to envision any other scenario to where he could have done any better.
Yeah.
Realistically,
Yeah.
I think, you could have said, well, maybe he could have made Texas and Oklahoma stay and gotten Nebraska back and all that stuff. Well, none of that's realistic. But realistically, he again, with the hand that he was dealt, because I don't think this league is as good as it would have been had Oklahoma and Texas stayed, and then you can go on with Nebraska and Missouri and and A&M and on and on. It's not like the old Big 12, which was really probably the best league for Texas Tech. But considering what you had to work with and considering the landscape you were playing in, I think that the Big 12 was a huge winner, in all of this. And I think that travel was a big winner in all of this. I mean, you are, it all fits together fairly nicely. I think, Brett Yormark kind of got his, I don't want to say national, but I think that you can now play games with the addition of the Arizona schools in Colorado and Utah. You can theoretically fill up inventory from 11 a.m. to a Saturday until 9 p.m. at night, or you can play on a Thursday or Friday, whatever you want to do. But you can legitimately have start times that really fill up, all kinds of TV windows, and that's what the ESPN and Foxes want. And as we know, those late night windows are valuable.
Yep.
So anyway, I was. And I don't want to come off, and I don't know how you felt, Choice, but I don't want to come off as like I was just like doing fist pumps or anything because it's weird, but I do think now you remain relevant. You're in a meaningful league. You're not going to be anywhere near the richest league or anything like that, but now you're relevant, and you have a seat at the table. And it wasn't just but a couple of years ago where you were just hoping, please don't put me in a league with like New Mexico or Nevada or whatever, American Athletic or Mountain West kind of concoction was going to get cobbled together once potentially the Big 12 is going to fall apart. But that's not what happened. And I think you're pretty set. And now it's up to Brett Yormark to kind of grow it and make this collection of 16 schools as valuable as he can.
Yeah, it is kind of ironic, the turning of the tables, because we sat here a couple of years ago and the Pac-12 could have done exactly what Brett Yormark did. They could have, because there's a really decent chance if they would have asked Oklahoma State, if they would have asked Texas Tech and a couple of others to come out west and play in the Pac-12 at that time with no stability in the Big 12, you're probably getting 4 yeses there, and you're probably dissolving the Big 12 as we know it at that point. Instead, 2 years later, it's flipped on its head. The Big 12 does that along with the help of the Big 10. And then there's no more Pac-12. So it's weird because I've seen a lot of negative comments, and I want to get your take too, in terms of just how this isn't necessarily good for college athletics. Everybody's chasing the almighty dollar. We're seeing these rivalries go away, but I guess I've been kind of desensitized to it because this has been going on for more than 10 years now, where it is all about money. When you saw that first wave back in 2012 where the Big 12 schools left, it's no different than then. The difference is geography has kind of gone out the window. And like you said, the Big 12 has 4 different time zones represented, which is crazy. But how do you feel about that? Is it sad? Is it kind of like a sad day for you to see all these rivalries continue to go away, or is it just par for the course of what it's been?
Yeah, I do think I do think there's a sentimentality to it for sure. I do think that there's some things that have changed that won't be for the best from the fans' standpoint. I don't like it as a fan that Tech won't play certain schools anymore. I think that's kind of what was fun about this deal. I think that we've been conditioned to root for revenue and some of these different things that really matter not to the general fan. And so I certainly get that. I hope that some rivalries can be born. Some rivalries can be, I don't know, the right word is renewed.
Yeah.
But there's a care factor. And you're right. I mean, there's going to be some things that people haven't thought about a lot. And then they're going to watch it kind of play out and go, well, this isn't ideal, or this sucks. Because you're kind of on the cusp of, college football being kind of this NFL model.
Yeah.
The college athletics from a football standpoint was always very regional. It was always, you want to be able to see your team maybe play an occasional road game, and you mix it up with opposing fan bases. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think any of us know any of Utah grads or Arizona State grads or Colorado grads or anything like that. We know plenty of Aggies and Longhorns and things of that sort. And so I mean, you're already kind of seeing it, because I do think, when you go back to the Big Ten, they're the ones that ultimately kind of, whether Colorado did it or whether George Kliavkoff did it, the ultimate final nail was administered by the Big Ten, extending offers by the to Oregon and Washington. And I think there was a lot of regret there in some ways, or kind of like a lot of pause, just because look, this is not a league that needs those schools. At the end of the day, their money is not going to change. If anything, it may drop a little bit. This is asset acquisition. Mm-hmm. And now you're starting to see a lot of, we have to fly. I mean, look at the map. If you're listening to this podcast and you're in front of a computer, or when you get to, where you are, if you're listening to us in the car, whatever it may be, Google just Big Ten map now or something like that. You'll see it, and it's because I've already seen some Michigan, leadership basically saying our teams can fly commercial quicker to get to London, England, than they can to Eugene, Oregon, or Seattle, Washington.
So I saw one too. UCLA's travel miles in 2024, playing in the Big Ten, because they have a road trip to Hawaii, I think, to start the season, and then they have a road trip to Rutgers. UCLA level is going to travel over 21,000 miles. 21,000 miles in 2024. I'm like, man, that's crazy. So out of comparison, I'm like, okay, I'm curious what ours is going to be like this year, because we got road trips to BYU and Wyoming and West Virginia. In comparison, this is one of the more traveled years that we'll have at Texas Tech in a while. We're only going 7,500 miles. So UCLA people are going to travel 3 times that amount. And that's going to be kind of normal. The football is not what's crazy about this. It's when you get into Wednesday night volleyball games and the basketball travel and the smaller sports is what's going to make these schedules really crazy and really difficult to navigate. But again, the money's there. They don't seem to care that much. I don't know I'm curious what the regret level will be like 5 or 10 years down the road from now.
Yeah. And maybe there will come a time, I don't know if we're there yet or if it's even on the horizon, but there may come a time where, football just breaks apart and does its own thing.
Sure.
And then all the other sports can kind of do their own thing and get back to some of this regionality. But I mean, we're talking pie in the sky scenarios, just because
we are.
the TV folks have this thing locked under contract, and they own all the sports and all the rights and all the television and everything like that. And so, but yeah, I to circle back, I do see some sentimentality in the whole thing. Yep. But this is the landscape, and a lot of it does suck. I mean, a lot of it, I think, was I ultimately rooting for the demise of the Pac-12? No, but what I was rooting for was the success of the Big 12, and unfortunately, you couldn't have both. So I think that's what it took. I was ultimately rooting for the Big 12 to succeed, because we're all going to localize this and do what's best for us, per se.
Yeah.
And guess what? You and I are broadcasters or alumni or
Mm-hmm.
fans or whatever, our interest was in Texas Tech, and so I was most concerned about that. And I hate that the Pac-12 had to sink. And it really sucks if you're
Yeah.
Washington State or Oregon State or Cal or Stanford. But I think this was because there's now, I mean, many years ago in the 90s, people thought four conferences, and it would be kind of like super conferences type stuff. I don't know if we could call what's left super conferences per se. I think most people would say that the Big Ten and the SEC are would qualify as that. But there's 64 teams in these four leagues, and those four Pac-12 schools are just out. And
Yeah.
I don't really know. And then you get into big picture conversations about how the college football playoff will now be, decided. That there was 6 automatic bids, and that was the 5 Power 5 leagues, and then it was the one Group of 5 bid that was the highest ranked, and then the next 6 highest ranked teams. And so I don't know if the Big 12 is going to have a tough time getting an automatic bid to the playoff, but some of that's going to get adjusted, and the money will be adjusted. And that's going to be interesting to watch. But those are
Mm-hmm.
things that will now play out because of what has happened in the last, 24, 48, 72 hours.
So what does happen, Level, with the name of the Pac-12? What do you predict? Do they try to
The
save?
Pac-12?
Yeah. Do you think they try to keep the name and merge with the Mountain West, or what goes on there?
I'd be willing to bet that the Pac-12 in name is done. I think that when you think about the economics of this, if you have to get out of the Mountain West to join the Pac-12, there's exit fees. Whereas if you are Pac-12 schools, you can just be absorbed by the Mountain West or the American Athletic or whatever it may be.
Right.
And you can just join those leagues and you don't have to, do anything financially. And I do think that I don't envision, like, say, for example, Stanford joining one of those leagues. I think they'll probably pursue independence just because, and think about it in these terms. You went from not knowing, look, we knew the Big 12 was going to be okay. Maybe it wasn't going to be as okay as it is now on paper, but you knew who you were going to play in football next year for the most part, all the things. If you're Washington State or Oregon State or Cal or Stanford, you literally have no idea
It's true.
who any of your programs have on their schedule next summer. I mean, you don't know what your budget for your athletic department is going to be. You don't know anything. And so I'm guessing that some of that stuff will have to play because they have no choice. It's got to play out rather quickly. And what does that look like? I don't really know, but I don't envision any sort of Pac-12, still being alive. And it's things like the Rose Bowl, which I did appreciate as a kid, the granddaddy of them all and all that. Well, that is gone now. That is not. I guess last year was the last time that you'll ever see kind of the Big Ten Pac-12 champ kind of ultimately do its thing.
So who gets the Rose Bowl?
Well,
I go to the Big 12.
I'm sure it's just going to become a part of whatever college football playoff, host on a permanent basis. But as far as the actual bowl game, I mean, heck, man, Woodman, think about it. I don't know now who the Big 12 has tie-ins with bowl games anymore because a lot of those were filtered through the Pac-12 conference. So are other leagues. So a lot has changed. A lot still needs to be figured out. And it's just kind of wild to process. But there's going to be a lot of different things. And we're only talking about really the football aspect. But the big winners here in the whole deal were, like, for Big 12 fans, was the league being sustainable. You're absolutely sustainable now.
Yeah.
And I think the basketball component actually got better.
Crazy to even think it could get better, but it did.
Absolutely it did. And so I think those are the kind of the big winners if you want to, quote unquote, localize it.
So, okay, a couple more on this, and then we'll look at Tech football for a moment before we wrap up. There's been reports that Stanford and some of the others have reached out to the Big 12 for talks with Brett Yormark and that sort of thing. There can't be any expectation that anything will come of that, right?
I think there was there was a report out that I think that there's a major shift happening I would pay attention to Florida State in the coming weeks.
Right.
I think I would pay attention to what's going on with these Pac-12 schools. I'm still not ready to put to bed the Gonzaga, the UConn scenarios for basketball only.
Okay.
I think there's even some suggestion that Yormark has been cleared to even still expand if it made sense. But I think everybody may hit a semi-pause, I think, right now, because I don't know if there's anything out there left for you to add of true value.
Yeah.
I think if you could amend the contract and maybe the TV folks were to go, hey, if you do this, then I think that they would go, okay, do it. And that's because ultimately it's Fox that had to allow the Big Ten to add Oregon and Washington.
Right.
They're the ones that called the shot, ultimately, not the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten had just heard for a year, there's no money, there's no extra money. The SEC has heard, hey, we're just going to play 8 conference games because ESPN, we don't want to pay you for a 9th league game and that extra inventory. So the SEC was like, well, if you're not going to pay us for it, then we're not going to do it. So the TV folks will ultimately call that shot. But I wouldn't totally put a lot of this to bed. I don't, however, view any one of the 4 Pac-12 schools as I don't see that. I don't envision that happening as far as the Big 12 conference goes. No, I just think they're just kind of stuck. I mean, I don't think the Big 10, and those are the only 2 leagues of the 4. I don't envision like the ACC doing this merger thing, which has long since been talked about. It wouldn't make any sense now for the ACC. That again, it's just they're just opposite ends of the U.S. So it sucks, man.
It does.
If you're one of those without a chair to sit in, because this was all a musical chairs game, and some were left without a seat.
Yeah, one more local angle. I mean, it affects your immediate. I mean, your future. It's not immediate, but your future scheduling football wise, because now Oregon becomes a Big Ten opponent for next season when you travel to Eugene, and Oregon State twice on your schedule. We don't know what conference they're going to be in, but following next year, you got back-to-back years against Oregon State. So it's going to be weird to just see how everything shakes out. The bowl tie-ins, like you mentioned, but there's still so many questions left out there. But we know the basics. It seems like that's where we're at the moment.
Yeah, and as I was processing everything last week before it ultimately all kind of played out, you had to think about, like, if you're the head coach at one of these Pac-12 schools and all this is being played out in the media, it would have been difficult to recruit or to hold on to recruit, because like, coach, man, what league are we going to be in? Who are we even going to play?
Sure.
Are my parents going to get to see me play? I don't know. And now if you're one of those 4 without, a spot, it would be extremely difficult to kind of keep things together. And Oregon State is a preseason top 15 team.
Yeah.
They're going to be preseason top 15 or top 20. I mean, they're expected to be very, very good. And I don't know. It's just, there's so many trickle down effects that, it just depends on how you look at it. And we were just kind of looking at it from a conference standpoint in the big picture. But, if you're coaching the Washington State program and you're thinking like, and if you're the marketing guy there, like, man, how are we going to sell season tickets next year? We don't even have any idea what a home schedule looks like.
Yeah.
And there's no built-in anything. I mean, I did appreciate Oregon and Washington both saying we're still going to play our in-state brethren. I think that I respect that. I appreciate that. I think that's the right thing to do, but not everybody has tried to do the right thing either.
Yeah. Our first question from the audience comes from Leah. It says, are the Tech coaches excited about this new Big 12?
Yeah, I think so. I think it depends on what sport, if you really want to get, big time excitement or whatever. But I think they're going to come at it from the standpoint of, well, our league is now solid.
Yeah.
We're not, I'm not having to deal with some of these issues that maybe we were just sitting there talking about with some of these other coaches are having to deal with, whatever, regardless of sport. And I think that again, how does it affect us or you or whatever? And I think that nobody was wanting to sign up for lengthy road trips, especially if you're coaching one of these Olympic sports. And the travel and just the dynamics would have just made the job ultimately a bit more difficult. And I think they've largely avoided a lot of that, because if you look at the Big 12 map, I mean, Texas Tech and TCU and Baylor and Oklahoma State are really just right in the dead center of the league. And
Yep.
there's going to be still a trip to Morgantown or Cincinnati or Central Florida or, one of the Utahs, but these are palatable. These are 2 or 3 hour flights at the most. And you're not going to have to do that, regularly, like an
Right.
every trip occurrence, like Washington. I mean, like West Virginia, they've complained about that privately or publicly for 10 years, because every trip they were taking was a long trip. I mean, Lubbock was one of the shorter ones for them, depending
Yeah.
on where they were going. And so I think that you'll hear a lot of positivity from a lot of the coaches, and it ultimately it means their budgets are going to be fine. They're not going to have to cut what they do, how they travel, how they're recruiting, but all those kinds of things. So because you all look at it from how it affects you personally, and I would say that I think you'll see a lot of thumbs up from the folks on campus at Tech.
I got a few more questions. We'll get to those in a moment. Did want to talk because overshadowed by all of this realignment stuff. Fall camp started up for everybody on Friday. Coaches met with the local media on Thursday. Is there anything that stood out from media days, players, coaches wise? Anything Coach McGuire said that stood out to you?
Well, I mean, a couple of bullet points. I think obviously he is willing to tell you, hey man, we're this much stronger and faster as a team. A lot of coaches will end up saying that. I think that he had a lot of data and numbers to back it up, on bench press and squats and jerk cleans. I think, is that right, Choice?
Jerk cleans, I think so.
You, me, and John Harris were talking about that together.
GPS times too, with the speed.
Yes, GPS times, which is data. I think the Bryce Ramirez news was not something I was necessarily expecting. I don't know exactly what that looks like, if he's just cleared for takeoff and just right there in the mix and can do everything else everybody can do. But either way, what an unbelievable story.
Sure.
Because you're I don't know, about 11 to 11 and a half months removed from when people were kind of worried, okay, is this kid even going to be able to walk anymore with this nerve damage and this and that? And then you're telling me that like he's, ready to play by the next season. I mean, kudos to the Tech, the trainers and the medical professionals that really have, and credit to Bryce Ramirez more importantly. Because, I mean, I think Joey would tell you that, hey, the loudest voices in our locker room are Tyler Shuck and Bryce Ramirez.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one heck of a statement when you have as many old guys on this team as they do, and guys like Bradford and Hutchings that have been around here for a long time, and guys like Rabbit and all those guys. So for Bryce Ramirez to have that much respect internally says a lot about who he is. But and then I think the main takeaway, though, was – we were under the radar last year. Whoop-de-doo. Like, expectations are high now. Get used to it. It's not changing. Like, embrace it. I wrote something on like during Big 12 Media Days. It's like, a lot of times, in that movie scene, you're in the tunnel and you see the light at the end. And you see, maybe it's like the movie The Fugitive or something a long time ago, and you turn around, and it's like you run away from the light, like, I gotta get out of here. I'm about to get run over. And it's as if Joey and his team, or he's got his team, they're running right toward that bright light,
right?
And basically giving it a big hug and ready for the collision. And so that's the mindset that I think he's trying to change.
Yeah, they have definitely embraced the idea of the hunted and hunter type of conversation came up a little bit, and he said we're not the hunted yet, but definitely embracing high expectations. Want to he'd rather be where there are expectations than not have any at all. And it's making for what should be an exciting fall, no doubt. But they start up camp this week, and some things will shake out. Any position battles we're watching going specifically into camp for you?
you really have to get into the weeds on some of this stuff,
Yeah.
just because I don't, Joey will tell you, hey, look, we don't have any starters set, but we know that there's a lot of things that are, in dark pencil, maybe even pen.
Yeah, I mean, you return 18 of 21 starters from last year, or your main starters from last year. So a lot of it is somewhat decided going into camp.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm interested in Gino Garcia at kicker. I don't think he's like worried about his spot or anything. I just want to see how he performs. I think he's, he's the kicker. I think your inside backers, we've talked about that a lot of the offseason. I think Josiah Pierre and Jacob Rodriguez are kind of the guys that will get the first shot there.
Yeah.
I would have thought that maybe Ty Buchanan could have made things interesting at one of the tackle spots, but he's going to be out for 2 to 4 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
I think so. That kind of takes that off the table. I mean, I think you're trying to figure out, who else behind, say, Taj Brooks and Cameron Valdez can step up at running back and maybe get some carries. I think whether that's Nehemiah Martinez, whether that is Anquan Willis, whether that is Bryson Donnell, you'll need a third ball carrier, I think, back there behind those two. I think those first two are mostly solidified. Does Dre McCray end up pushing his way into the starting lineup, if you will? Because I don't really even. It's like I guess on paper, Loic, Jerron Bradley, and Miles Price are your 3 starting wide receivers. But I look at Dre McCray every bit of the starter as those guys are, based on what he can do that those other 3 can't. And so, you can talk yourself into a variety of different things, but these are really like depth conversations as much as like starters, which is really why I think people need to understand on paper, you're pretty good. You don't have a lot of questions when you're trying to figure out like who's your third running back, who's going to be one of your top backup DBs, or who is behind, Jacob Rodriguez and Josiah Pierre at inside backer, who, and I would say that, offensive line depth just in general, I think that is worth watching, but these are not anything that's going to like decide whether you win a game or not necessarily. But we'll all watch it, but I've never really had a year like this. This is a bit different than what we're used to.
It definitely feels different heading into it. A couple more questions from the audience. This one was a leftover one from last week from Matt. We didn't get to it. Who needs to be the best newcomer for the football team? Not who will be or who is or who needs to be.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Joey really hit on when camp opened up was he really spoke about how important it is to be, better and really good if you want to win at a high level, like win the league or even go further, is how good you need to be in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's either Rusty Stats or Steve Linton.
Yeah.
They are newcomers. They are, I think, have all, received heavy praise, and I think rightfully so. I think, and so those two, and I guess I would say, if you really want to pin me down, I would probably say Steve Linton needs to be. I mean, you need, because if look, at the end of the day, Rusty, if he's solid, you're going to be fine. But I don't know if like getting to where you want to go, you can get there if somebody like Linton, which again, maybe somebody else fills that role, but he needs to not just be solid. He needs to be, I think you've seen Coach Blanchard and Coach McGuire, they talk about him as like a draft pick, a high-end draft pick kind of, if they do what he thinks. And then I think I saw Dane Brugler of The Athletic, I think is who he still works for, or somebody, he's a well-respected draft analyst, and he had Steve Linton coming into this season as a top 10 edge guy, just in a positional ranking. And I think that tells you what a lot of people in and outside the building think about what he can do, but he's just got to go do it. Because if he ends the season with 5 sacks, I just don't know if you ultimately can achieve some of your goals. But if he ends the season with maybe 11 or 12 and he's disruptive, and then I think you could be cooking with gas there a little bit.
You know what? This is an off the cuff question, but someone asked it on our show this week. Would you rather have Steve Linton 12 sacks or Tyler Shuck account for 40 touchdowns this year?
Tyler Shuck, without a doubt.
Yeah, that's what you haven't had a quarterback account for 40 touchdowns in quite some time. So
yeah, that one's easy.
It means he's healthy the whole time.
Well, but it also, but that's a really easy question to answer from the standpoint of, you could get 3 sacks and a loss, but if you're telling me 40 touchdowns, I mean that every time you score a touchdown, I mean, those are points, and so these are points on the scoreboard. A sack could just be, in the scheme of things, meaningless. It may not factor in to change the game, win you a game or whatever, but touchdowns do. And so I would say that, you know, it also, to your point, it suggests that Tyler Shuck would be healthy and productive all season long, which I'd like to see that. And I want to see Barron in camp as well. I think that he's gotten high praise, but I think we want to see a quarterback kind of get in a rhythm and get healthy and kind of, you know, maneuver his way through a season.
Last question, we'll wrap. Scott asks, will the conference, the Big 12, have a name change?
I think it's very possible. I don't know. I think that Brett Yormark will consult. I think that that's probably already, a lot of that has gone on. I don't know if it's ultimately a name change, but if it is, it'd be completely rebranding. You know, of what you are based on, because I think this group of 16 would like to kind of grow old together. You're certainly going to be in you know, in the same league for the next 5 years with this current media deal that you're in. And I don't know if there's an option here for year 6 or whatever, but I do think it's possible. I mean, it's kind of funny that the Big 12 will have 16, the Big 10 will have 18. You know, it was probably smart of the ACC and the SEC back in the day just to kind of go with a direction or kind of a geographic word.
Which can't really do that in the Big 12 either right now.
No, you can't. You know, unless and if you changed it, I don't know. I don't think you want to do the Big 16. Maybe that's what they would do. I don't really know what you would do, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a, you know, and folks that are smarter than Brett Yormark will tell him, you know, they'll attach a value to that. If you rebrand, if you change the name, it could potentially be worth more money to you in that sense. And if that's the case, and guess what? He's gonna change the name. Yeah, that's right.
No doubt. Level, we've already run out of time, and football season is here. It's been a wild one. We'll do it again.
Okay. Yeah, and if you change the name, man, we'll get a lot of logos and a lot of shirts and fields and courts.
True.
It would be costly to change it too, at least your logo. And, but that, you know, we shall see. But man, enjoyed it. We are back in August, and we'll be rolling, I guess, from here on out. So
yes, sir.
Keep hope alive, everybody.
Absolutely. That's Chris Level. I'm Chois Woodman. Been tuned into the Ask Level podcast, brought to you by Double T 97.3.
You've been listening to the Ask Level podcast, powered by Double T 97.3.